Hi, let's revisit a question from last time. Can you cite popular sources in a college paper? Short answer, no, but long answer, it depends. We'll explain more in today's video. Hi, and thanks for joining the English Wiki channel. So last time we talked about different kinds of sources. There are popular sources which you generally don't cite in college papers, but there are exceptions, which I will explain more today. Then there are professional sources. These are more reputable sources which you can often cite in college papers, especially introductory and first and second year courses. Then there are the academic sources, which are what grad students deal with most often, and it is not so common for college students to deal with them except in more advanced courses. So I distinguish these sources by the four following criteria. 1. The author. Is the author a trained academic expert, or at least a professional expert with professional expertise in a particular field or in a particular area? The information. Is the information good, reliable? Is it in-depth, precise, accurate, or not? And 4th, the quality control. Are there quality control mechanisms in place to ensure the quality of information? When it comes to popular sources, these have the following characteristics. 1, the author is not an expert. The author is not a qualified academic expert. The author is not even a professional expert, does not even have professional expertise in the topic, like from years of experience in a particular business or profession. The information is superficial, usually not very in-depth, perhaps not very accurate or precise. The information is often secondary. The author has gotten the information from another source and may not even cite it or may not cite it very carefully. The information could be common knowledge. For example, the information in general reference books, and that's why we don't generally cite encyclopedias and dictionaries. The information could be subjective or opinionated. The information could be anecdotal, and one person's experience does not make something true necessarily. The information might be entertainment driven, commercially driven, trying to sell issues of a magazine. Or the information could be fairly carefully researched. It could be good information, but it may not be good enough for a college paper. The audience could be anybody who can read, basically, young, old, educated, less educated. The quality control mechanisms might be weak. There may be none, or there may be simply editors and publishers who are concerned as much about the general factuality of the content as well as its marketability, its commercial potential. How many issues can it sell? How many people can we get to click on this headline? And the concern is not for the depth and quality and precision of the information, but perhaps commercial concerns as well. So, some examples. You might have cited Wikipedia articles in high school, but not in college papers. Why? Well, any typical Wikipedia article, like any encyclopedia, is written by you don't know whom. You don't know who wrote it. It might have been written by a professor with expertise in this field. It might have been written by a drunk guy in Detroit or a teenager in Toronto. You don't know who wrote it. You don't know their credentials, their qualifications. Now you can click on the Talk tab of a Wikipedia page and maybe see information about the writers, but at most you see their internet monikers and you don't really get information about who they are really and their qualifications. So the information in Wikipedia article is at best secondary. It might be good, but it's secondary, not necessarily reliable, and it may be superficial. It really varies. Now at the bottom of the Wikipedia page you might see some good references. Those references might be good for you, but the Wikipedia article itself is probably not a good reference. Another example would be popular trade books. These are books that are sold in bookstores, marketed to general public. A lot of them are infotainment. They're maybe informational and educational, but at the same time they're trying to entertain you. They're trying to sell copies. Books and magazines are often infotainment driven. For example, Malcolm Gladwell is an author that I like. I highly recommend that you read him for your own informational and educational purposes. But it wouldn't be good enough for a college paper. So Gladwell is a New York Times journalist. He writes really cool, interesting books about interesting social and psychological phenomena. He's a good writer, and his books are generally good, but not good enough for college papers. Why? Well, he's not a trained expert in psychological or sociological research. Some of the information he has is good. He has interviewed psychologists and sociologists and maybe read some professional secondary sources on it. Some of the information is overgeneralized, oversimplified. Some of the information is just not quite accurate. He gets a few things wrong. So it's good for personal purposes, but not for college writing. Popular periodicals fall into the category. They're for commercial, entertainment, or infotainment purposes, and thus the information tends to be kind of superficial and maybe not precise or accurate. Textbooks and reference books, they represent the common knowledge of the field, beginner knowledge, and are not really citable for college papers usually. Smaller newspapers, they may not have the resources to do the journalism that world-famous newspapers and news outlets do. Another example is something like Fox News. Something like Fox News is partly entertainment driven, and it's also trying to cater to a particular segment of the audience, those with particular political views. Fox News is notoriously biased. They are not doing objective journalism, but they are trying to persuade you to a particular viewpoint. Some famous international newspapers, like the New York Times and Wall Street Journal, might have a slight lean politically to the left or the right, but they still do objective journalism, investigative journalism, and analysis. It is still quality information, it's still professional. But sites like Fox News are not concerned so much with objective journalism, but rather entertainment. It is more infotainment or entertainment driven. The information tends to be pretty superficial. The information tends to be very biased. They are catering to a particular audience who believes in a certain way, or they're trying to convince you of a particular point of view to a degree that the more reputable news sources are not trying to do. So, are these citable? Okay, well, it depends. In special cases, they might be citable. You wouldn't cite Fox News as your main source of information for a paper on a current topic. You would probably want to cite a more professional source or sources for information. But then if you want to then talk about conservative and liberal opinions on a particular matter, you could then cite Fox News for conservative opinions and Mother Jones for liberal opinions as examples of differing viewpoints, but not as your main source of information on a topic. You might cite popular sources, say for a freshman paper where you want an interesting anecdote for your introduction, possibly, but it's always better to get it from a more professional source if possible. You might cite a smaller newspaper if it has broken a story, if it is a primary source of information. Let's say the Springfield Gazette has broken a news story that Mayor Quimby has been taking bribes from the mafia. Then you could cite the Springfield Gazette as a useful source because they're the ones that broke the story. You might cite media sources as popular examples of literary phenomena. So let's say you're taking a literature studies class and you want to look at popular adaptations of elements from Shakespeare plays, and you might cite, Star Trek examples or Simpsons or fictional TV shows as examples for your paper. Let's say you're writing about a particular social phenomenon, whether it's a course in linguistics, media studies, history, literature, whatever. You might, along with the professional or academic sources that you cite, you might also cite popular examples from popular media, again, maybe The Simpsons, for example. And the question then arises, how do you cite these in your paper? If you are in a humanities class and you're using the Chicago Manual of Style or the MLA, Modern Language Association format for citing sources and the end references or works cited in your paper, It is possible to cite popular sources and include them in your end references, where you treat them like normal sources. Now in my case, I might do it differently. I use a different format called the APA, which is mainly for academic sources. So let's say I'm writing a linguistics paper and I am using academic linguistics sources to analyze, let's say, the linguistics of a particular popular expression, for example, the way we use like. I would cite academic sources in my paper in APA in the in-text citation and the in-references, but then let's say I cite quotations from popular media, popular TV shows, and internet sites. Those I might just footnote. Instead of treating them as an APA reference with the author and year, I might just footnote them, and I put the full information at the bottom of the page, like the name of the Simpsons episode and when it aired and the time index, and that's it. I don't include it in the in references. That is an option for when you do cite popular sources, for example, as just examples of an interesting social phenomenon. Those are cases where you might cite popular sources in your paper. So I hope that answers most of your questions. If you still have questions, post them in the comments below and I'll try to get to them. Next time we're going to look more at a subset of popular sources of unreliable sources and in how to detect and avoid using unreliable sources in your paper. So thank you for watching and see you next time.